I was trying to find the tuition check from the Miller family, which meant moving a stack of mail that had migrated across the kitchen table over the last 3 days. I remember the feeling of the paper slipping, a handful of envelopes, and a takeout menu sliding onto the linoleum, and the sudden, sharp annoyance of having to bend down and retrieve them while the dishwasher was still humming in the background. I had the ledger open, the one where I track every cent that comes in from the kids, and I was cross-referencing it with the joint account statement. I stopped at a line from Tuesday. There was a charge for $42 at AutoZone. "Did you let Erica use the card?" I asked. Peter was standing by the fridge, staring at a jar of mustard like he was trying to remember if we had any. "What?" "The statement. Tuesday. $42 at AutoZone." He didn't look over. "No. Well, someone used it. Erica's been complaining about her breaks for a month. Did you give her the login or something?" "I used it," he said, finally closing the fridge. "For the wipers. My wipers were shot." I paused, looking at the date again. "I didn't see you change them. I did them Tuesday morning, before the shift. I don't know why you're making a thing of this." I felt the heat in my neck. "I'm not making a thing of it. I'm just asking why it's coming out of the business account." "That's for the daycare. That's for the insurance and the supplies." Peter sighed, the sound of a man who had already decided the conversation was a waste of time. He mentioned something about the dispatcher's office being a disaster that morning, something about the snowplow crews fighting over the salt routes. But I wasn't really listening. I was still looking at that $42. "It's just a few bucks, Pat," he said. "I just pulled it from there because it's the easiest place to get the money. It's just that spare household money you make. It's not like it's a corporate payroll." I stared at him. I wanted to tell him that spare money was the result of 12 hours a day with toddlers and a constant fear that someone would trip over a rug and sue us into the ground. I wanted to explain that the account existed so I wouldn't have to ask him for a reimbursement every time I bought a gallon of milk or a box of tissues for the kids. I closed the ledger with a snap that sounded too loud in the small kitchen. "It's not spare," I said. "It's my income. There's a difference." Peter shifted his weight, leaning against the counter. He didn't look guilty. He looked bored. "You're getting worked up over $40. Pat, I'll put it back on Friday when the overtime hits. It's not about the $40. It's about the fact that you think you can just dip into it because it's easy. It makes the whole business feel like a hobby you're just letting me have." "That's a stretch," he muttered, finally moving toward the door. I just needed wipers so I could see the road. I didn't think I needed to file a formal request with the CEO of the living room. He left the room, leaving me with the open statement and the lingering feeling that my work was only visible when it was time to spend the profit. I spent the next hour pretending to organize the playroom, moving a bin of oversized Legos from one corner to another, just to avoid sitting in the silence of the kitchen. I kept thinking about the word spare. It felt like an erasure. When I started the daycare, I'd spent 3 weeks painting the walls a specific, state-approved shade of beige and scrubbing the baseboards until my knuckles were raw, all while Peter told me it was a great way to stay home with the kids. Now that the kids weren't mine and the money was real, it had reverted to being a domestic convenience. The side door clicked open, and Erica walked in without knocking. She was still in her work polo, looking frayed. She didn't say hello. She just dropped a heavy folder on the kitchen table, right on top of my ledger. "The regional manager is breathing down my neck About the inventory shrink in the brake pads, she said, leaning against the counter. I swear, if one more shipment comes in short, I'm just going to drive to the warehouse myself and count them. That sounds like a manager problem, I said. I didn't really care about the brake pads. I was still vibrating from the conversation with Peter, and her stress felt small and distant compared to the feeling of being robbed in my own house. Erica sighed and rubbed her temples. Whatever. Anyway, I was thinking about Mom and Dad's anniversary next month. I saw that cruise package, the one that goes up the coast. If we all chip in, we could actually afford the balcony suite instead of the inside cabin. I don't know if I have the time to go, I said. Oh, come on, Pat. You can just find a substitute for a week. Besides, she added, her tone shifting to something casual, almost helpful, you've got that extra daycare money sitting there. You could probably just cover the upgrade for the parents. It's not like you're spending it on anything specific, right? It's just, the house cushion. I felt a sudden sharp jolt in my chest. The house cushion? Yeah, Erica said, glancing at me. The spare stuff. Peter mentioned you guys have a good buffer now. I stepped toward her, my voice getting tighter. What exactly did Peter tell you about my account? Did he tell you he's been using it for his car parts? Is that why you're suggesting I pay for a cruise? Erica blinked, her expression shifting from exhaustion to genuine confusion. What? No. Why would he tell me about his wipers? I don't care about his wipers, Pat. I stopped. I had assumed they'd been talking, that there was some agreement between them, some shared understanding that my business account was a communal pot they could dip into whenever they felt the cushion was thick enough. But Erica looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. She didn't know about the AutoZone charge. She didn't know about the easy withdrawals. But she had still called it a cushion. He didn't tell you, I said, more to myself than to her. Tell me what? She asked. Look, if you can't do the cruise, just say so. I'm not asking you to bankrupt yourself. I just thought since the business is doing well, it was just there. She didn't apologize for the assumption because she didn't think there was anything to apologize for. To her, the money existed in the same way the laundry existed. Something that just happened in the background of the house, managed by me, available for the family. Erica checked her watch and stood up. I gotta go. I forgot I promised to call the pharmacy to refill Dad's blood pressure meds. I'll handle it so you don't have to worry about it. She left as quickly as she'd arrived, the folder still sitting on my ledger. I stared at the cover of the folder, then at the ledger beneath it, feeling the gap between how I saw my day and how they saw my life. The kids had been gone for 2 hours, but the house still smelled like lukewarm apple juice and the industrial-strength lemon cleaner I used on the high chairs. I spent a few minutes picking up the stray crayons that had rolled under the radiator, a task that felt less like cleaning and more like reclaiming my living room from a small, chaotic army. I heard the heavy thud of the recycling bins being dragged across the driveway. Peter was out there, doing the one thing he never forgot. He had a system for the bins, glass in the blue, paper flattened and stacked in the green, plastics rinsed and sorted. He did it with a precision that almost bordered on the obsessive, a carryover from his years at the dispatcher's office, where a single misplaced detail could send a snowplow to the wrong county line. I watched him through the window, his movements efficient and sure. He didn't need to be reminded, and he didn't ask for help. It was the one area of the household where the labor was clearly partitioned and fully owned. When he came back inside, he was shaking the cold off his hands. Binds are done, he said, heading straight for the coffee pot. Erica was here, I said. I was still holding a yellow crayon. Yeah? I saw her car. She wants us to pay for a balcony suite for Mom and Dad's anniversary cruise. She called the daycare money a house cushion. Peter didn't stop pouring his coffee. It is a cushion, Pat. That's what a savings account is for. It's a buffer. It's not a buffer for a cruise. Peter, it's for the business. If the state changes the square footage requirement, or if I need to replace the flooring in the play area, that's where that money goes. He leaned against the counter, the steam from the mug hitting his face. We're not replacing the floors tomorrow. You've got plenty in there. Erica's just thinking about the parents. She's thinking about the parents using my income, I corrected. You're doing that thing again, he said, his voice flat. The thing where you turn a nice gesture into a ledger entry. It's just a trip. We can figure out the numbers when the time comes. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I felt a surge of certainty. He had told her. He hadn't given her the login or a specific amount, but he had shifted the narrative. He had planted the idea in Erica's head that my business was just a well-funded piggy bank for the family. It made sense. It explained why she felt comfortable suggesting I foot the bill for a luxury suite without even asking if I could afford it. He had paved the way for her to see my work as a convenience. You told her we had a buffer, I said. I might have mentioned the business was doing well. Is that a crime? It's a crime when you're talking about my money as if it's a communal resource. Peter sighed and took a slow sip of coffee. I don't know why you're so wound up. It's a house. We live in a house. Everything in the house is kind of shared. That's how a marriage works, Pat. He didn't look at me as he walked toward the living room, effectively ending the conversation. He wasn't angry. He was just dismissing the point, treating my objection as a mood swing rather than a boundary. I went back to the kitchen table and moved Erica's folder. Underneath it, the ledger was still open. I looked at the total for the month, then at the $42 he'd taken for his wipers. It wasn't the money. I could have given him $40. It was the way they both spoke about it, as if the money had simply appeared in the account by magic, rather than through the grueling, repetitive labor of wiping noses and mediating toddler disputes for 10 hours a day. I started loading the dishwasher, the clink of plates filling the silence. I found myself wondering how many other things they considered shared without asking me first. I didn't have any proof of other withdrawals, but the way Peter had brushed me off felt like a confirmation. He wasn't just minimizing the $40. He was minimizing the entire operation of my life. I reached for the detergent pod, but my hands stopped. I realized I was out. I looked at the empty container, and then at the door to the garage, where Peter was already settling into his chair with the news. I didn't call out to him. I just stood there in the quiet kitchen, staring at the empty plastic tub. I didn't call out to him. I just stood there, staring at the empty plastic tub of pods, feeling a strange, stubborn desire to let the dishes sit in the sink until they grew a film. It felt like the only thing I could control in that moment. I remembered a time, about 6 years ago, when I'd started doing the same thing with the parents' Christmas gifts. I'd just bought the sweaters and the specialty jams and the gift cards without mentioning the cost, because Peter hated the logistics of splitting things 3 ways. He'd always say, "Just handle it, Pat. You're better at the lists," and I had taken that as a compliment. I'd spent years being the one who smoothed over the gaps, the one who made sure the birthdays were marked and the bills were paid before they became late notices. I'd done it because I liked the feeling of being the reliable one, the one who kept the wheels turning, while everyone else just enjoyed the ride. "Pat, have you seen my work flashlight?" Peter called from the living room. "The one with the orange grip?" "I don't know," I said, my voice flat. I knew exactly where it was, tucked behind the mudroom bench, because I'd moved it so I could vacuum the rug, but I didn't feel like being the one who knew where everything was. "Check the mudroom?" he asked. "I'm busy with the kitchen," I replied. I heard him huff, a short, impatient sound, and then the sound of him rummaging through the bench. He found it eventually. I heard the plastic clatter. He didn't come back in to say thanks. I leaned against the counter and thought about Erica. I had been so sure that Peter had sat her down and told her about the business account, that he'd actively rebranded my income as a house cushion to make his own life easier. It felt like a betrayal, a secret alliance between them to diminish my work. But as I stood there, I realized that Erica hadn't even asked Peter for the details. She had just assumed. She'd assumed it because, for 20 years, I had been the person who just handled it. I had built the expectation that I was the safety net. Peter hadn't had to tell her the money was there. He just had to not tell her it wasn't for her. The cushion wasn't a lie Peter had invented. It was a role I had volunteered for, one that had slowly expanded until it swallowed the boundaries of my actual job. I felt a momentary flicker of guilt for snapping at him about the wipers, but it was quickly replaced by a colder realization. Even if Peter hadn't conspired with Erica, the result was the same. He still thought the money was a buffer. He still thought my business was a domestic convenience. The fact that he hadn't actively plotted it didn't make the $42 any less of a theft, and it didn't make the cruise suggestion any less insulting. I walked over to the kitchen table and picked up the ledger. I didn't close it this time. I left it open to the page with the AutoZone charge, right where Peter would see it if he came back for more coffee. I grabbed my keys and the grocery list I'd started on the fridge. I didn't tell Peter I was leaving. I just walked out the door and into the biting Vermont air, the wind whipping across the driveway and rattling the empty recycling bins. I needed to buy detergent, but as I started the car, I found myself wondering if I should just stop by the bank and move the business funds to a different account entirely, one that didn't have a joint signature. I came back from the store with 2 heavy bags, the plastic handles digging into my palms. I didn't say anything as I walked into the kitchen and started unloading the groceries. I put the detergent pods on the counter with a deliberate thud. Peter was still in the living room, but he came in when he heard the bags, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood. "Get the milk?" he asked. "I got the milk," I said. I didn't look at him. I was focused on putting the yogurt in the fridge, lining the containers up exactly as they had been before. "Look, about the cruise," he started, leaning against the doorframe. "I think you're overthinking the cushion thing. Erica just means we're in a better spot than we were 5 years ago. It's not a conspiracy. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy, Peter. I'm asking why you let her believe my business account is a family fund." He shifted his weight, looking past me at the counter. "I didn't let her believe anything. She just brought it up, and I said the business was doing well. I didn't give her a balance sheet. But you didn't tell her no," I said, finally turning to face him. "When she started talking about the balcony suite, you didn't say, 'That's Patricia's business income, not a vacation fund.' You just let it hang there. Because it's easier," he muttered. "It's easier than having a whole debate about whose money is whose every time someone mentions a gift for the parents. We've always just handled it. I opened my mouth to respond, but the phone on the counter buzzed. It was a text from Erica. Pharmacy messed up the dosage on Dad's meds. I'm on hold with the doctor now trying to fix it. Can you check if he took the morning pill? I don't want him double dosing. I looked at the screen and felt a flicker of irritation. I didn't want to deal with the pharmacy, or the doctor's office, or the logistics of my father's blood pressure. I wanted to finish this conversation. I wanted Peter to admit that he had traded my boundaries for his own convenience. Erica's having a problem with Dad's meds, I said, sliding the phone toward him. You should probably deal with it. What? Peter looked at the phone. I'm not the one who's good with the pharmacy stuff. You usually do the check-ins. Erica's doing it, I said. She's the one on the phone. Just, I don't know, call him. I can't do this right now. I turned back to the groceries, ignoring the fact that Erica was the one actually doing the work, the one currently fighting with a medical office, while her own manager was breathing down her neck. I was so focused on the cushion that her actual effort felt like an interruption. You're being really sharp today, Pat, Peter said. I'm being sharp because I'm the only one in this house who sees the work that goes into that account, I replied. You think the money just grows there like a weed. You think, because I'm home, that the labor is invisible. And then you tell Erica it's a cushion because you don't want to be the bad guy who says no to a cruise. I'm not trying to be the bad guy, he said, his voice dropping into that flat, minimizing tone. I'm just trying to have a Tuesday. Can we just put the groceries away? He reached for a bag, but I stepped in his way. Did you tell her the account was joint? I asked. No. Did you tell her you had the login? No. Then why did she think it was a house cushion? Peter paused, his hand hovering over a carton of eggs. He didn't look at me. I don't know, Pat. Maybe because you've always just paid for everything. Maybe because you make it look easy. The silence that followed was heavy. By then, I knew he hadn't lied to her with a specific story. He had just let the silence do the work. He had allowed the image of my effortless competence to become a license for them to ignore the cost. I stepped aside and let him take the bag. I walked out of the kitchen and went straight to the mudroom, where I sat on the bench and stared at the orange grip flashlight. I didn't call Erica back to tell her I'd check on the pills. I just sat there in the dim light, listening to the sound of Peter putting away the groceries in the other room. The mudroom was cold, the draft from the door still clinging to the floorboards. I stayed there for a long time, listening to the rhythm of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a neighbor's dog barking, the heavy, methodical way Peter moved through the kitchen. When he finally came to find me, he didn't come in all the way. He stood in the doorway, his shoulders blocking most of the light from the hall. You still in here? He asked. I'm thinking, I said. About what? The $40? About the cushion, I replied, looking at the orange grip flashlight. I want to know exactly what you said to Erica. Did you tell her that the business account was for the house? Did you tell her she could suggest I pay for a cruise because the money is just sitting there? Peter shifted his weight. He didn't look at me. He looked at the wall of hooks where our coats hung. I didn't say it was a house fund, Pat. I just said we were doing better. I told her the business was steady. That's not the same thing, I said. If you tell someone a business is steady, you're talking about growth. If you let them believe it's a cushion, you're talking about a resource. Why didn't you just tell her it was my money? Because it's a hassle, he said, his voice flat. I don't want to spend my Tuesday afternoon arguing with my sister-in-law about the semantics of a savings account. It's easier to just let her think things are fine than to have a whole thing about who owns what. It's easier for you, I said, because you're not the one who has to say no. You get to be the neutral party while I'm the one who looks like the Scrooge. I'm not trying to be anyone, he muttered. I just like it when the house is quiet. You've always just handled the money, Pat. You've always just made it work. I figured that's how you wanted it. I stared at him, and for a second, I felt a surge of that old, familiar pride, the feeling of being the one who kept the wheels turning. But it was immediately followed by a wave of nausea. He hadn't just enabled Erica. He had used my own competence as a shield to avoid the discomfort of a boundary. He liked the smoothness of my life because it meant he never had to deal with the friction of the actual costs. I thought about the text from Erica, still sitting on the kitchen counter. I thought about her on hold with the doctor, the frustration of the pharmacy mistake, and the way she had stepped in to handle the meds without being asked. I had been so focused on the cushion and my own indignation that I had treated her actual labor as an interruption. I had wanted to punish Peter, and, in doing so, I'd brushed off the one person who was actually doing the work of caring for our father in that moment. I felt a sharp, sudden pinch of guilt, but it didn't soften the anger. I realized I had been deciding whose problem counted based on how much it annoyed me, which was exactly what Peter did. I'm going to check on Dad's pills, I said, standing up. Good, Peter said. He stepped back, clearing the doorway. I'll finish the groceries. I walked past him into the kitchen. The house felt different, smaller, more crowded, as if the invisible lines I'd drawn around my work had finally been erased. I picked up my phone and saw another message from Erica. Doctor fixed the script. I'm picking them up on my way home, so you don't have to go out again. Just let me know if he took the morning one. I started to type a reply, then stopped. I looked at the ledger still open on the table, the AutoZone charge staring back at me. I didn't send the text. Instead, I walked to the hallway phone and dialed my father's number, listening to the ringing in the silence of the kitchen. My father answered on the third ring, his voice sounding thin and distant, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. Hello? Hi, Dad. It's Pat. I'm just calling to check on your meds. Did you take the morning pill? The small blue one? There was a long pause, the kind of silence where you can hear him thinking, trying to mentally retrace his steps through the morning. The blue one? I think so. I remember the water glass. I think I took it. Are you sure? Can you go look at the organizer? Just check the Tuesday slot. I'm sure, Pat. I'm not that far gone yet. He sounded annoyed, a sharp edge cutting through the fragility. Erica already called. Why is everyone calling? I just wanted to be sure, I said. I didn't tell him. Erica was the one who had caught the pharmacy mistake. I just told him to double-check anyway, and he grumbled something about too many cooks before hanging up. I walked back into the kitchen and texted Erica. He says he took it. Thanks for fixing the script, she replied almost instantly. No problem. See you later. I put the phone face down on the table. Peter was leaning against the counter, eating a piece of deli ham straight from the package. He looked at me, waiting for the mood to shift back to something he found manageable. Everything okay with Dad? He asked. Fine, I said. I looked at the ledger, then at the computer on the small desk in the corner of the dining area. I'm moving the business account. Peter stopped chewing. What do you mean? I mean, I'm opening a new account, just in my name. I'm transferring the balance and changing the direct deposits from the parents. You won't have the login anymore. He swallowed the ham and frowned. Now you're just being spiteful. Over $40. It's a joint household, Pat. Why are you making this a legal battle? It's not a battle, I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. It's just a business. If it's a cushion for the house, then it's a cushion that I'm managing. You don't need access to the operational funds for a business you don't work in. It's a daycare in our living room, he said, gesturing vaguely toward the playroom. It's not a storefront on Main Street. You can't just pretend it's separate from the house. I looked past him, through the open door into the playroom. I saw the beige walls, the reinforced corners on the tables, the specific state-mandated layout of the nap mats. I saw the space that had slowly eaten the living room, the place where I spent 10 hours a day, fighting to keep toddlers from biting each other, while trying to maintain a professional reputation. For years, I had tried to blend the two, the business and the home, thinking that if I just worked harder, I could make the transition seamless. I thought that if I handled everything perfectly, no one would notice the strain. But the seamlessness was exactly what had allowed Peter and Erica to treat the income as a byproduct of the house, rather than the result of my labor. That's the problem, I said. It is in the living room. Peter looked at me, confused. What does that have to do with the bank account? Everything. As long as the business is in this house, you think the money belongs to the house. I didn't have a plan yet. No lease signed, no commercial space scouted. But the thought had settled in my mind with a sudden, heavy clarity. I couldn't keep the business here if I wanted the work to be respected. The physical boundary was the only thing that would make the financial boundary real. You're not seriously thinking about renting a space, Peter said, a small, dismissive laugh escaping him. Do you know what that would do to the overhead? You'd lose half your profit to a landlord. I'd rather have half the profit and my own name on the door than a full account that you treat like a slush fund, I said. I walked over to the computer and logged into the bank portal. I didn't look at him as I started the process of opening the new account. The silence in the kitchen was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic click of the mouse. I clicked the final confirmation button on the screen, and the bank portal refreshed with a success message. The balance of the business account had shifted into a new, single signature account. I remember the sound of the mouse clicking, a small plastic snap that felt like it was cutting a cord. Peter didn't say anything for a long time. He just stood there, watching the screen, his expression shifting from confusion to a slow, simmering annoyance. He didn't argue anymore. He just let out a short, sharp breath and walked out of the room. He didn't ask for the login again, but he didn't apologize either. It took 3 weeks to find the space. It was a small, dated storefront on the edge of town. A former pharmacy with linoleum that was a slightly different, less approved shade of beige than the one in my living room. It was more expensive than I wanted, and the heating was temperamental, but it had a separate entrance and a door that I locked every evening at 5. Moving the business out of the house was a slow, exhausting process of subtraction. I remember the Saturday I spent hauling the nap mats and the oversized Lego bins into the trailer. I felt a strange, hollow sensation as I cleared the living room. I spent an hour scrubbing the baseboards one last time, removing the scuff marks from 3 years of toddler traffic. When I finished, the room was empty. The space where the play area had been felt cavernous and unnervingly quiet. For the first time in years, I could walk from the kitchen to the front door without stepping over a stray toy or navigating a maze of plastic chairs. Peter liked the quiet. He spent the first few evenings sitting in the living room, staring at the empty space, with a look of satisfaction that felt like a rebuke. He didn't mention the loss of the cushion or the fact that I was now paying a monthly lease. He just enjoyed the fact that the house had returned to being a house. The routine resumed, but the geography had changed. I drove to the storefront every morning, spent my day in a space that belonged to the business, and drove home to a husband who no longer had a reason to check my balance. On the first Friday after the move, I saw a notification on my phone. It was a transfer from Peter's personal account to my new business account. $42. I didn't text him to thank him. I didn't bring it up at dinner. I just opened the ledger and recorded the entry, marking the AutoZone charge as paid in full. "Did you see the mail?" Peter asked that night, leaning against the counter. "There's a flyer for that new hardware store opening up near the square." "I'll check it later," I said. I went back to the living room and sat in the silence, looking at the clean, empty floor. The noise of the daycare was gone, and the financial boundary was set. But as I looked at Peter in the kitchen, I realized we had just found a new way to be quiet around each other. I stayed in the chair, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, and didn't move to help him with the mail.